Hello, welcome to the Show Up Dad. This is a podcast for hardworking fathers looking to level up their fathering skills and be more than just a paycheck or provider for their home. Today on the Show Up Dad, we welcome retired Master Chief Jason Gardner, a former Navy SEAL of 30 years and a leadership instructor for Echelon Front. He is also a father of three children where he resides in Washington by the Canadian border. I'm stoked to have you on here. Thanks for coming out on today's episode. I want to kick things off today by you giving listeners an overview of your story, both personally and professionally, Jason.
Thanks, Dave. So I did 30 years in the SEAL teams. I served at every level of tactical leadership and several levels of executive leadership. And what was really challenging for me was not so much the tactical level, because that's when you're out there doing stuff, doing the job with the men and women that were in the SEAL teams and in our support. But when I promoted in those executive levels, and then I was in an office sitting behind a computer answering emails and going to meetings, and that's not the kind of person I am, and it was a real struggle for me to find value in that, but I did. And I had a fantastic career. I got 9 deployments, 5 combat deployments, and then I transitioned out 2 years ago. I had a good plan for my transition, and I started working with Echelon Front as a leadership instructor, and I've been doing that, and really, really happy.
Man, it's so awesome to have you on here. And I just want to transition to this topic we're going to be talking today. It's going to be about father's duty. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to start off with this piece that I read, and it says, "Peace, it is said, is the condition we enjoy when other people just leave us alone. Throughout history, the father of a family would protectively stand in the doorway of his home and say, as it were, to the whole world, leave us alone, leave my family alone." What do you think makes an effective protector from a father stance, and why do you think men fail at this?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think what makes an effective protector, number one, is someone that's actually physically capable of protecting their family, and so that means that you can do it. And whether or not and for a lot of people, like, look at me, I'm 5'6", walking around like at 157 pounds. I'm not going to clobber most people, but I am very proficient with firearms, and so that's the great equalizer, right? All men are not created equal, but Smith and Wesson made them that way. And for me, in the way I look at things, I think firearms are a part of our heritage, and I think that it's my responsibility as dad to understand them and understand the safe utilization of those firearms in the protection of my family, if need be. So that's number one. But that's just the top layer, and then we want to get into those layers underneath it. And this is where I think a lot of guys fail, because they stop right there. They got the concept of being able to protect their family, um and maybe it's not with a fire alarm, but it's by some other means, where they got a safe room or then call 911 or whatever you got.
Mhm.
They fail in that they've got to train their families to learn how to protect themselves, because they're not always going to be there. What happens when something occurs when they're off at work? What
Mhm.
happens when something occurs if you pass away? None of us are going to be here forever. So we have got to train, we have to empower, we have to give ownership to our families so that they are capable of protecting themselves. And in Echelon Front, we got 4 laws of combat. It's cover and move, simple, prioritize and execute, decentralized command. And that's what I'm talking about now, is decentralized command. And that's the position where everybody leads.
Mm.
And that's the situation where your daughter, if she's out after dark, she's just not staring at her cell phone as she walks down the street, but she's paying attention to her surroundings.
Mhm.
That you have developed a relationship with all of your children where they're comfortable coming to you and talking to you about problems. Sexual assault is a huge problem in our society, and it's not just girls. There's as many boys are victimized by sexual deviance as our girls. So it's something that, man, if your kids have a weird encounter with a coach or a pastor or somebody that has access to them, and or worst case scenario, a family member, you want them to be comfortable enough that they can come with you and have those tough conversations with you, or you can't set them up for success. And this means you can't solve all their problems, because if life is an obstacle course, and that's what it is, we don't want to get the world ready for our kids. We want to get our kids ready for the world, and we need to teach them to navigate those obstacles. And personally, I've never learned a dang thing from someone saying, hey, do it this way and this way. 90% of my learning is hands-on, doing, and failure. And so knowing that, I want to allow my kids the opportunity to fail. And that means that sometimes I just got to watch them do it. And of course, I'm not going to let them fail. Where the failure is going to result in them having something catastrophic happen. Like, I would never just watch my kid not look both ways crossing the street, get hit by a car, and say, hey, how'd that feel, dummy? No. But for instance, like if my daughter climbs up an apple tree and then starts crying that she wants help getting down because she's stuck, inside I want to go rescue her and help and get her out of the apple tree, but that's not, I would be failing her as a father if I did that. I wouldn't be protecting her in the long run. Now what I can do is go over and coach her and say, hey, you can do this, and just hold on to that branch over there and move your leg here and get down and let her do it on her own. So that's it. And it's tough. It's a tough thing to do, because you have to be able to let go and watch them fail, which is a really difficult thing to do with your kids, but that's how you're going to make resilient adults.
Yeah, I like that you said that. Trust the process, because everything's a process in life, right?
Yeah.
You need that adversity so you can grow, so you can stretch, and adversity hurts. We know that. And I like that you allow your children that much leeway to be able to grow as adults, so they're successful later on in life. That being said, Jason, a man also defends his family through what he earns in his work. That is, he doesn't just provide for his family. He protects them from poverty. He shelters them. He takes care of their needs, like a roof, food, clothing, etc. How has rural living allowed you to teach these life skills to your children?
Well, I'll tell you, we made a lot of sacrifices when we moved to the area that we moved to. And so I think a trap that people get caught into, because it's a real dichotomy. And what I mean by that is you've got opposing forces pulling in opposite directions, and they're both right. Like, that draw to earn money, to take care and keep your family comfortable, is very strong, and it's the right thing to do. Now, that draw to be available for your kids is also, it's pulling you in the opposite direction. And it's something that you have to be aware of so you understand where the balance is. And so what my kids are aware of right now, and I'm really glad that we had this opportunity, is when we left where we lived in San Diego, we moved up here in northeastern Washington to a super rural area. We're living in a 1-bedroom cabin. We got 1 bathroom. The kids have got like their own place where they sleep, and it's it. But you know what? You don't, how much more do you need? And so that is one of the interesting lessons that they're learning, where right now we've made some sacrifices, and it's like, this is good enough. We're happy, because we spend most of our time outside anyway.
Yeah.
So that balance, and it's a tricky one. Like, how much do you actually need to be happy? And this is one, again, where it's like the first thing we were talking about, where you can get pulled too far to, I need to earn money for the family. And then at the end of the day, your kids don't know who you are, and you haven't been around to have good discussions and be present in the moment, because none of us know. We're all on borrowed time here.
Yeah.
I might be working real hard so that 5 years from now we'll be comfortable, and then get hit by a bus. So there's great arguments both ways. The key is you just have to have a balanced approach to it. And the rural living right now has given the kids, our family, a real idea of like, hey, we don't have that many things. Our cars are all old, and that's it. And then the other thing is the opportunities for, like, go to restaurants or for them to do a lot of different sports aren't available out here. Like,
Yeah.
I would love to put my kids in gymnastics, but I'm not doing the hour and a half drive to get them to a gymnastics class every day. So not so much. So it's just the basics, and we had to, had to prioritize what is important for us, and it's a good thing for them to see.
Yeah, it's good to see the trade-off. I mean, because you gave us the pros and the cons, right?
Yeah.
On one level, you have that closeness that you're making with your family. That's something that I'm doing now. That's something that had affected me, chasing after success in the workplace as a lineman, building power lines all over. And then I was, like you said, trying to be a good dad by buying them stuff instead of giving them me. I was the present. I should have been there for them,
Yeah.
and I've seen that. And it's great that you touch base on those pros and cons of that. How does it affect, like, I don't understand. Are they homeschooled? Are your children homeschooled? Is that how you guys have it set up? Or
No, we our kids go to a small public school that's by us, but
okay.
it's kind of an interesting setup. So my daughter has got 9 kids in her class. My son's got 14 kids. We know all the teachers. All the kids know each other. And we're real happy. And if you can gauge anything by their test scores, they're doing very, very, very well in this environment. Actually, I don't think my wife and I just don't have what it takes to be able to homeschool them. There's something to be said for that information coming from somebody else, a teacher, as opposed to their parents, and especially my daughter. She's going to be 10 this year, and she's right at that point where everything, she can only take so much from us, and then it's gotta come from somebody else. So that's what it's great. And COVID was a huge challenge. Luckily, they're here. They're back going to school for like 3/4 days right now.
Yeah, my children are still on lockdown. They're still on Zoom, and I'm fortunate enough that I'm at the house now with them to kind of coach them and guide them on the Zoom. But you're absolutely right, bro. I mean, it takes a special person to be there with them and just be able to teach them. I give credit to teachers. They don't get it. They don't get the level that they need as far as good job. You know what I mean? Because I mean, it's a hard job being a teacher. Absolutely. Jason, I wanted to ask you,
Yeah.
a father's duty is to protect his children, right? From forces that threaten them, drugs, bullies, potential disasters, right? All these different things. What are some concerns of fear that keep you up at night as a father?
My fears are that if my kids are in situations when they're teenagers, that they wind up with the wrong crowd, and they could get sucked into making some really poor decisions just going along for the ride. And that's what scares me. Now, I think the only way around that is to have open and honest discussions with them about a lot of the things out there, specifically drugs, specifically crystal methamphetamine, which is it's extremely horrible to some of the people it affects in this area. And when you see somebody that is like that, pointing that out, and then having a discussion about, and I really don't want to go down the road of like, hey, there's a meth head, and calling people names, but going down the road of, hey, that's a person over there. That's a person that has parents and siblings and all that stuff. And they've been pulled down this road, and you need to have a little bit of empathy for them, but you need to also understand how they got where they're at, so that when you're faced with decisions, you don't make some of the same decisions. And I really want or hope for my children that they get to the point where they realize 90% of the reason why they're at where they're at, it's because of the decisions that they're making every day, that they're able to take ownership of stuff and not to cast blame and be resentful.
I like that. I like that. Yeah, I think today now society they don't want to take ownership, like you said. They want to right away point the finger and say, oh, I did this because of this, or they're doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's really happening with our society today. You know what I mean? They're just pointing the blame, you know? Not only is our duty, right, to strengthen them, but we also got to show them later how to protect themselves. What are some steps you can share with the audience and how to accomplish this?
Well, specifically, and this is going to be difficult during a COVID environment, but get them involved in some kind of grappling. And so that might be wrestling, that might be Brazilian jiu-jitsu, that might be one of these things that's a hybrid. I'm not going to tell you what the best thing is to do, but I want you to get your kids exposed to some kind of grappling, because they can always run away.
Yeah.
Right? If someone's going to punch you, you can run away. It's when somebody grabs you that now you're stuck, and you need to have an understanding of how to grapple. And especially for, and I said this, it's for both kids. But more so for my daughter, if somebody grabs her, if she's going to get attacked, it's more likely going to be in the backseat of a car. And I want her to have an understanding of what it's like to be grabbed, so that her mind doesn't go into panic mode and lock up, and then she can do enough to get away. And there's a lot of, I don't care, if you're a 120-pound woman and there's a 250-pound guy that's got a hold of you, there's a couple things you can do that can get them to release the pressure so you can get away. And so I would say involve them in that. Hey, they might not like it. It might not be their thing, but have them do it for a little bit, so they're exposed to it. So if it ever really happens to them for real, God forbid, then it's not the first time they're happening to it, and it'll be a completely different brain chemistry that they'll go through in that situation. The second things here in the United States, we have, people can have firearms. I think you should do some firearms safety and training with your kids. Maybe you don't have guns in your house. Can you tell me that your kids won't be over at someone else's house that doesn't have guns in it? You can't tell me that. So what you need to do is at least give them some kind of education and training, so that they understand how firearms work and how you use them responsibly, and what to do if you ever see a firearm. Because you don't know that they might be at an aunt, an uncle, or friend's house, and they might see a pistol underneath the bed. And then what? And then what do they do? So those are the two steps. And I think they go in that order. Number one, get them exposed to grappling. And it doesn't have to be a long exposure, expose them. And number two, have some discussions about firearms. And then number three is have an open dialogue with them, so that they're comfortable coming to you with their problems.
I like that. I really do. One of the things my father taught us growing up, because we were avid outdoorsmen, is he would take us and he would tell us about gun safety, right? And then he would take us when we would shoot an elk or a deer or whatever. He would go show us the damage that bullet caused.
Yeah.
And, I mean, these animals are big. And when you're seeing the entry and the exit wounds on that thing, and the damage when it hits bone, and you're seeing that grapefruit size hole on the other side, we're getting a visual of how dangerous those weapons could be, and not to be afraid of them, but to respect them.
Yeah.
You know?
And so it's interesting. I've kind of come up with a formulation for this, and more so with boys than girls, because it's different. My son is really my youngest boy, and I did the same thing with my oldest boy as well. They both just really excited about and curious about firearms.
Mhm.
So when they shot their first firearms, I had it be one that it wasn't gonna be a comfortable experience. My oldest boy, it was a 45 1911, and I was behind him helping him hold it, but he shot it, and then he put it down, he held back the tears, and he didn't want to shoot again. And that's because he respected it. I want him to know it wasn't a toy. With my youngest son, it was a 20 gauge shotgun.
Mhm.
Hey, you're gonna shoot this, not a 12 gauge. I don't want to break his collarbone,
Yeah.
but he needs to have his attention gotten. And then he's like, oh, he put it down. There was a lip bite. He wanted to cry a little bit, but he didn't. And then it was like, okay, these things are real. Then I shifted gears back to the 22 caliber, and we start talking about fundamentals and things like this. And then I'd run drills. Every time we get the firearm out, I talk about our rules of safety, and and then I say, hey, like, if you ever see a gun out, what do you do? And they're like, oh, you come get an adult, you don't pick it up, you don't do any of that stuff. And then I'll test him.
Mhm.
I flat out tested my son and I did it with both of them. I'll be cleaning a weapon, leave it out where I know that he's going to come by and see it, and I'll go hide so that I'm watching him and I can see what he does. I'm not just leaving it out there. You get it? And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
in both cases, they came out, they saw the gun, and then they came to find me to tell me that there was a gun out.
Mm.
Well, what if they'd picked it up and grabbed it? Do I come around the corner and start barking at him at the top of my lungs? Probably
No.
not a good idea. There are good ideas come around and go, hey, we discussed this. You really don't ever pick these up. Here's the reasons why, in a mellow tone of voice,
Mhm.
and that's how I work through it. But yeah, that's it. Now, I don't know if that applies to the little girls.
Mm.
Going with the heavier caliber to kind of teach them respect.
Mhm.
And this is a read and react kind of thing. I think you just have to judge the child. My daughter is way more cautious around guns, and I think already respects them. So
Mhm.
there wasn't a need to have her shoot the 20 gauge, for instance. And
Mhm.
she's really squared away when we go shoot and all that stuff too.
I like that you said that you got to gauge your children, and that's showing that you are being present. You know the needs of each and every one of your children because they're going to be different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I really like that you said that. What are some of the mistakes fathers make in trying to toughen up their children? What do you think?
Yeah. Um, the mistakes that they make is, one, maybe they have some realistic expectations for how tough a kid could be at their own age. They have to remember what the kid's perspective is. And number two, the going the other direction is just solving all their problems for them, and everything's just easy street.
Hmm.
We're working through an issue right now where my youngest son, he doesn't understand the value of money. And so he gave somebody $10 for a sucker. And I'm like, I was mad at him, but then I thought about, well, I can't be mad at him for this because I failed him in that he doesn't know the value for money. So explain to him, like, you don't understand the value of money, and I'm not working you hard enough
Hmm.
for the money you get. And so we're going to go work real hard, and you're going to work with me, and you're going to find out what $10 is worth. And then and so that's it.
Hmm.
All these things. It's so difficult with kids because their perspective is different. You pay all their bills, you bring them their food. When they get to be finicky eaters, it's because they've never been hungry.
Hmm.
So it's crazy, and it's a balance. We talked about this
Yeah.
earlier. It's like, hey, you might be way tougher on them than what they rate as a kid, and the
Hmm.
other thing is you're just making their lives too easy.
I like that what I'm getting from all this is exposure. Try to
Uh-huh.
expose your kids to as much of the world as possible, right? Not in a sense that you're exposing them to like drugs and all that, all the negative stuff, but let them be aware, help them to be aware, and that this stuff is out there. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think in the eyes of our children, right, we are lifelong leaders and teachers. They look at us, they look to us when there's a situation. They're reading us. That's one of the things that I always tell the fathers I speak to all the time, is that we have influence in their lives. So they're always going to look at us, whether it be them picking up something you said and mimicking it or whatever. You know what I mean? They're watching us as leaders. What are some lessons that resound with you from your childhood, Jason?
So your kids are going to pick up more from what you do than what you say. And so I'm going to answer this in two parts, right?
Okay.
As parents, like you said, they're always watching us. So if you make an inappropriate comment about somebody over something that they can't control, or you make fun of people, or you make fun of someone's weight or something like that, they just caught that and they now think it's okay to behave that way. If you lose your temper in traffic, they're watching you and they're going to mimic that response. If you're not able to have calm conversations with your spouse and your conflict resolution isn't very good, they will pick up on that, and then their relationships probably will wind up the same way. So for me, it's been super helpful just to keep that in the back of my mind, that okay, everything I'm doing, I'm setting an example for my kids. One of the things that I took away from my childhood is my mother was super driven. So she had us in both my brother and my sister. We did sports. There wasn't a thing my mom wouldn't have done for us. And so if we decided that we wanted to, play the piano, she would have gotten us piano lessons. And so she got us into all kinds of different, I mean, we did all kinds of different sports, and this chewed up all of her time and her weekends driving us to and from these sporting events. And she would get up in the morning to bring us to swim practice and all that. Now, she kind of chose the sports that we were most involved in, but okay, cool. If I was given my own choice as a kid on what I was going to do, I'd have been home. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to watch Thundercats all day.
Yeah.
And that's it. So that discipline, that drive, that persistence that she taught me, and I watched her go through, because my dad was in the Marine Corps, and so my dad would be deployed. One time my dad was deployed for a whole year, and my mom was trying to raise me and my brother, and she's doing a dang good job and still getting up in the morning and taking us to these swim workouts and and going to all the different sports that we did, and even coaching one of our soccer teams. It's like amazing. It was amazing that she gave that much of herself to us because she wanted something better. Yep, there you go.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting that you said that, because I seen that even with my own wife being on the road. I left her here with 3 children, right? Baby. And we live on a farm. So we got chickens, dogs, cats, you name it, right?
Yeah.
And she would call me once in a while, and I'd be like, what are you doing? What's all that noise? She's like, I'm breaking all the ice. Because you have to break all the ice for the waters, right?
Yeah.
And then chopping wood and making kindling and all that stuff, So we definitely prepare. She definitely never grew up like that. She grew up in the city, but coming out here and learning that experience, I know I can trust her to be able to do that if anything happens to me.
Yeah.
I think that's so important, like you said, to empower them.
Yeah.
And give them that
That's
exposure.
an awesome story.
Yeah.
I like it.
No, it was crazy, man, because she would be like just having to chop wood. She's like, okay, well, what do I do now? And I'm over there like, okay, well, you know how to make the kindling, you know how to start the fire, and you just kind of get them to go through the process in their head so they don't panic. You just got to keep them calm. I liked what you said about how, going back to one of the stories you're talking about, how the gun, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you could have came and you could have yelled at your kid, but what would yelling have done? It would have just heightened and really brought more anxiety to that situation instead of talking to him calm. And I think that's what I did with my wife. I responded to her in a calm way and being like, hey, you know what to do. You got this. You can handle this. Now I got to get back to work, so I'll call you later. You know what I mean? Type of
Yeah,
thing.
and that speaks volumes to her bravery because it's really
Yes.
scary for someone who didn't grow up in a rural area to move to one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's fantastic. What a woman.
Yeah, it hasn't been easy. Let me tell you, brother. I did a lot of mistakes. That's one of the things that drove me to being able to have this podcast and talk to other men. You know what I mean? Just to let them know. One of the biggest things that my father always told me is learn from other men's mistakes.
Hmm.
Right. And I once read a quote that Socrates wrote, and he put, employ your time in improving yourself by other men's writings, so that you shall come easily by what others have labored for. And I like that quote. You know what I mean? Just get
Hmm.
in there and be prepared, right?
And so that's an interesting concept because when you talk about learning stuff from a book, you
Mm-hmm.
still have to have some kind of life experience for it to have some value.
Yes.
And so getting out there and doing something and reading is just been amazing. And I'll tell you, the last 4 or 5 years, um, since I've become exposed to podcasts in general, and I'm just not listening to talk radio and wanting to rip off my steering wheel because I'm mad at the world.
Right.
Uh, I've become exposed to a lot more of this stuff, and of just looking how to improve and become a better person, and looking at these other situations and reading stuff that other people went through. And it's a great perspective builder. Anytime that I start to feel sorry for myself, I can just look back at like some book that I read about the Holocaust or the
Mm.
Gulag or the Bataan Death March, or good grief. Currently I'm reading a thing on the Civil War, and they're talking about sleeping on dead bodies, and I'm like,
Mm.
good, that's horrible.
Yeah.
And then going, yep, I don't have things that bad. I've got no reason to complain.
I like that. I like that perspective. That's one of the things I always try to tell my kids too. It's like you don't know what bad is. You know what I mean? Get out there
Uh-huh.
and what you really see. You know what I mean? Life is hard. You know what I mean? It's hard, and you got to be prepared for whatever it gives you. You know what I mean? And I think one of the guests I had previously said that life is hard. Helping your children shouldn't be. How did he put it? I can't even put it in perspective the way he said it, but it was so awesome the way he said it. He said, life is hard. Training your children shouldn't be that hard, or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't make it harder than what it needs to be, is the way I got it. Right.
Hmm.
Now, with that being said, Jason, our protective, empowering lessons about right and wrong echo in our children's lives. We talked about how they watch you, right?
Hmm.
Long after we've left, right? And we go to see our maker or whatever we believe in, we never stop being a father. We live on as a great man in the hearts of your children. What legacy do you want to leave with yours?
I want to leave my children behind with a legacy of kindness.
Mm.
I want my children to become kind, confident, competent adults. There is real proof that kindness is the best way to go if you want any kind of change.
Mm.
If you talk about the civil rights movement, who got more change enacted, Martin Luther King or the Black Panthers?
Exactly, Martin.
Martin Luther King. A recent example that I really enjoyed on the Rogan podcast was Daryl Davis, and Daryl is he's a black guy, and I hope that's just the word I'm using. If it's offensive to you, I'm sorry, but I'm at lack of another way to describe it. And anyway, he's a black individual. He's gotten over 200 guys to leave the Ku Klux Klan.
Mm.
Now, as a black guy, if anyone has a right to be angry and point fingers and yell at the Klan, you would think it's him.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what everybody does, and it doesn't move the needle. Daryl has done it by engaging with them in regular conversation and becoming their friends. And then after a while, they're like, oh, okay, this ideology of hating people is really not a good ideology, and I'm leaving it. And the lesson that you take away from that is that direct frontal assault usually isn't the most effective. If you're able to come around from an angle, and the indirect approach is the best one. And right now, we are really, really polarized as a nation. We got to remember that the enemy is outside the wire and that we're all Americans. And whatever political party you're at, just because you disagree doesn't make you enemies, and just because you disagreed, doesn't mean that you can't be friends. So if I could, because I want my kids to always have that angle of kindness when they move through life, because I think it'll make them more efficient. And in the end of the day, I think their lives will be better if that's how they approach things.
I like that. I really do. There's a scripture in the Bible that talks about how when your enemy's being, bad with you, that to be nice to them, return kindness to them, and it'll heap coals of fire on their head. And that's sometimes you see that, when someone's being a jerk or being negative with you, and you return in an act of kindness to them, it's almost like they seize up. They're like, oh, why am I not getting to you? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it takes the ultimate strength to return a frown with a smile. And if you really get to pay attention to your own physiological responses to like that engagement and stuff like that, when you have the strength to do that, it makes you feel better. Definitely.
Oh, definitely. And that all falls back to self-awareness, correct? Just being totally in tune with yourself and what your limits are, and then setting up healthy boundaries. You know what I mean? And I think that's awesome that we are able to see that and hopefully teach our children those healthy boundaries as well. You know what I mean? Because there's bad out there. You know that you've been in the military and everything. You know evil. You've seen it. You know what I mean? You know what's going on. So we definitely need to make our children aware about that evil that lurks out there, that bump in the night. You know what I mean? And that way they're more aware and they're able to engage it in a different perspective. You know what I mean? And just have that self-awareness. What are some of the biggest mistakes fathers make that are hard to recover from, do you think?
Betraying your children's trust. And this can happen in a manner, a bunch of different ways. But when you lose their respect or betray their trust, by not being there for them, by not actually taking on all the responsibilities that you have as a father, which absent fatherhood is a huge problem in our society right now. So I would think that would be the hardest thing to recover from. The good news is you can do it.
Yeah.
It's your children more so than anyone else will give you the benefit of the doubt, and you can earn their trust back, but you're going to have to work for it, and it's not going to be easy.
I like that. That's one of the things we tell our fathers when I'm coaching them is it is possible to be a better dad. It's going to take hard work, and there's no such thing as mastery. We all make mistakes. Jason, you have 30 successful years on the teams, right? You have accomplished some amazing things, right? Sometimes our careers define us as a man. I know that I define myself with being a lineman. Okay. How difficult of a transition was it to step out of that role and take on fatherhood?
So once you realize that it's the same thing, it's not that hard. I mean, the hardest thing about being a father is now once you're a parent, all the spontaneity is gone. It's not your day anymore. It's somebody else's. So, but that's, you know what? It's like jumping in the cold swimming pool
Mhm.
for like the first 45 seconds. It's not comfortable, and then you get used to it, and then it's all good. Okay, I can't just pick up and go out with my buddies if I don't have a sitter laid on or any of these things. So putting others first before yourself is a hard transition to make. But
Mhm.
when you make that transition, then it's a great, because that's how you can actually improve, where you have this sense of service, and it's better for you in the long haul, I think.
I like that. Yeah, just that's just being a servant leader. And it's so true. I know for me, children have showed me how selfish I was. Because then
Mm,
you're absolutely right. It's not your time anymore. So
yeah.
now you're having to jump through hoops, or I shouldn't say jump through hoops, but now you're having to plan your day
Mm,
better, right?
yep. Yeah.
One of the things we always say in the line trade is plan your work, work your plan,
Hmm.
you know? And that's how I look at it. Is now that's one of the challenges I face with is now I got to plan my day according to my children, not what I want, and die to my selfish desires and put their needs first.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely, and that's a super. I struggle with it, just like being able to cut out some time during the day and like, hey, what do my kids want to do right now? Do I do what I had planned for them, or maybe we just play Legos or go sledding or something like that? And there's a balance with both of that, but it takes planning, and it's somebody bigger than you. With leadership, one thing I noticed in the military
Mm-hmm.
is you got kind of two kinds of leaders that you're working for. The leaders that you work hard for because they're going to yell at you if you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And you got the leaders that you work hard for because you're afraid of disappointing them. And when I kind of wrapped my head around that, and then I thought about, well, wait, what is the difference between these two leaders? What is it that makes me afraid to disappoint this leader, and this other leader? I'm not really worried about what he thinks of me. I just don't want him to yell at me. And it comes down to the leaders that actually pay attention to you and know what your deal is as a person and care about you. Those are the ones that you work hard for because you don't want to disappoint.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that doesn't mean that's the person that let you come in late or cut corners or anything. When I say takes care of you, that's the person that tries to make you a better person in general. And when you fall short of the standard, they let you know, hey, you're short of the standard here. I need you to do a little better.
Hmm.
You know.
Yeah, and that goes into one of the books I'm reading right now. They have me reading for church. It's a
Mm-hmm.
leadership book by John Maxwell, right? Developing the
Uh-huh.
leader within you. And he talks about those 5 stages of leadership, right? And one of the first positions is positional rights, okay? And
Mm-hmm.
people follow you because you've been appointed by someone else to be a follow to be that leader in that thing.
Mm-hmm.
So they only do what you said because of your position.
Yep.
And then you go into what you're talking about, the second level, which is permission. You're building a relationship with those people. They follow you because they want to,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
I think that's interesting that you said because you got to have the relationship, even with our kids. One of the things I heard from a clinical psychologist was that our boys need boundaries before they have relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they're just going to continue to challenge you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you got to have boundaries for them. And then they'll have that relationship afterwards with you because they respect you, like you were talking about.
Yeah.
Now, with our daughters, in order for them to do what you say, you got to have a relationship with them. And then the boundaries will come.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in general I tend to agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
I get more pushback from my daughter than my son. My son's just a lot easier than
Yeah.
my daughter is because um, my daughter is always wanting to know why or push back a little bit, and but then she just thrives off if we have a family meeting or something like that and say, here's why you can't behave this way, and here's how we need you to behave, and then dials her right in. Um, Whereas sometimes with my son, I just look at him and he knows and he'll lock it up. But the the more lasting way to do it is to develop that relationship. It always is.
Mm-hmm. That's funny that you said that. You give him the look. I remember my father used to give me the look, and we knew,
Yeah.
we knew that we were going to be in for it. You know what I mean? He just had to
Hmm.
give you that look. And you're absolutely right. I have a 14-year-old daughter, and she challenges me on everything. Well, father, you said this. You're not doing this. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And it's like, why can't you just fall in line like the rest of them? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
One of the things I'm doing now is like, we'll go. She loves hunting. Okay,
Yeah.
she's all about hunting. So I got to get her through hunter safety course and stuff like that. That way
Hmm.
she can go with me and start getting these tickets that we get, for bull elk season. Anyhow, we start talking about that. So I start engaging with conversation with her. And at first, when I'm dealing with her, it's kind of like yes and no. So then I got to start thinking, okay, I need to start asking her open-ended questions.
Hmm.
And that takes a little while, you know what I mean? But then she'll warm up to me. And then all of a sudden she doesn't, I mean, she don't turn off. I mean, next thing you know, daddy, why is this? Why is this? Why is this? Can we go for this? Can you teach me how to drive? Can you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
it's
Oh man,
awesome.
that's awesome. I got goosebumps because that's that sweet spot that you want to be in where they're talking with you, and then that's when the parenting really begins.
Mm-hmm. And it's so awesome. Now, Jason, I want to ask you, brother, what bit of advice would you give your younger self if you bumped into you?
So I carried a lot of resentment in my heart as a younger man.
Mm-hmm.
And I would tell myself that, like, hey, every opportunity, every day, take an opportunity to look at the things that you should be grateful for and foster a sense of appreciation in your life. And that would have helped me out immensely. Um, and there you have it. Because you know, I, I wouldn't say I was entitled. I worked very hard for a lot of this stuff, but I did carry a lot of resentment, and that wasn't healthy for me. It was a poison that I could have let go a lot longer, and I'm glad I let go of it now.
Hmm. I like that. I transitioned that to saying operating from a state of gratitude, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Being thankful for those little things that life gives you.
And that's the amazing thing about just podcasts in general. I was listening to a podcast recently with a neuroscience scientist, and he was talking about like 5 pillars of health.
Hmm.
And there's like exercise, diet, sleep, relationships,
Hmm.
because we're social animals. You have to have relationships with people. And then finally, that sense of gratitude.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that that's huge. And we, all of us, just living in this day and age when things are better than they've ever been, there's more opportunity than there's ever been, we all have reasons to be some reason to be have a sense of gratitude.
Hmm. I like that. I like that you said that. What is one of the things, Jason, a challenge that you're still facing or you have faced that has caused catalyst for growth for you as a father?
Oh, my temper,
Temper?
man. Yeah. I mean, I'm not different than anybody else, and so yeah, I won't have a lot control on my temper, and I'll bark at my kids, and then I'll think, okay, was that actually the best way I could have dealt with that? Um, and unfortunately, sometimes it seems like they're just not listening. They're blowing me off, and I wind up having to yell. But I could also very calmly go up and get them and set them down and say, hey, you guys aren't paying attention to me. And here are the things that are going to happen if you continue not to paying attention to me. And have a better control over my emotions is a daily struggle
Hmm.
for just controlling that my temper. And I'm way better than I used to be, but I got a long way to go. And it's like you said, we all have room to improve. I When I'm talking about leadership, I talk about humility being a huge leadership trait. And a lot of people mistake humility for meekness. And
Hmm.
I think my definition for humility is if you're humble, you have you realize that you still have room to improve.
Hmm.
And then, so when my when my daughter calls me out on something that I did wrong, I can, instead of getting angry with her and go, well, you know what, you're right. You got me. I'm going to do a better job at that, and move forward in that direction.
I like that you said that, because that also shows your daughter that, hey, you are real. You're not
Mm-hmm.
just this dictator who's barking orders or whatever, whatever the kids think,
Yeah.
but that you're man enough to admit your faults and be like, look, I messed up. Here's
Mm-hmm.
me humbling myself, not in a weak way or anything like that, but just showing you, hey, look, it's okay. We make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
That way they don't grow up thinking that we're too critical with them. I've seen a lot of fathers where they've been so hypercritical for whatever hurts that they dealt with in their past. You know what I mean? Whatever that's going on with them. I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
but they bring that into this relationship with their children, to where they're hypercritical, to where everything they do isn't right. So their kids grow up with this sense of failure. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They don't even want to try, because guess what? It's never good enough for dad anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really unfortunate. And it's a cyclical thing. And the only way to break out of that cycle is to be able to look at yourself and fix it. I've seen that in other fathers. I've seen it in myself, and it's something that the only way to work is get forward. And like you said, and that goes back to what I was talking about with setting the example. When you set the example for your children, like, yeah, I've made a mistake and I'm going to do better. You're teaching them basically a college course, just in those small words that you're saying, as long as you're sincere about it, about how to get better and how to improve and how to be a better person.
I like that. I like that. Well, Jason, thank you for coming out on this podcast, bro. I mean, this is just such a blessing that you were able to come on here and just share your insight and wisdom, dude. I mean, you're amazing. You have an amazing career, an amazing family, dude. And I thank you for what you're doing in the service to this great country. And dude, I just want to be able to support you in any which way I can. Can you give our audience a way to get a hold of you if they have any questions or anything?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at jason.n.gardner, and I work for Echelon Front. So if you're looking at hiring us for any consulting, we solve problems through leadership, and they're at echelonfront.com. Thanks, Dave, for having me on.
Yeah, thank you, brother, and God bless. And just keep taking care of that beautiful family of yours, brother.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.